Hello and welcome to Monocle on Culture. I'm Robert Bounds. Adrenaline junkies, daredevils, or just plain crazy. Stunt performers transform the ordinary actor into a doer of extraordinary things. Taking risks and pushing the limits of human potential is just another day in the office. The Fall Guy, a new film from David Leitch starring Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt about the travails of a stuntman, got us fixated on dancing with danger this week. Throughout cinema, though, there have been classic moments which have had audiences in awe, from Tom Cruise clinging to a cargo plane in Mission Impossible to the classic chariot race in Ben-Hur. Stunt performers have entertained the masses for decades, but their tenacity and backbreaking work has often been overlooked, except by their doctors. Stunt performers are the unsung heroes of the entertainment industry, and on this week's show, we're putting them front and centre. We'll be exploring the tireless work that goes into perfecting a sequence, from developing the concept to dotting the I's and crossing the T's on the waiver form before perfecting that one take. We'll also be looking at the legalities around film production and questioning whether looming technologies promising to cause upheaval in Hollywood will impact the craft of taking a hit for cash. Strap in then, that is all coming up right here on Monocle on Culture. We start with that new film, The Fall Guy. Loosely based on the 1980s classic TV series, the movie follows the stuntman Colt Severs, played by Ryan Gosling, who's coaxed out of retirement to work on the directorial debut of his former girlfriend, played by Emily Blunt. He then gets pulled into a conspiracy, of course, that threatens to shut the movie down and put some of that stunt performer training into real-life use. The film is a high-octane crash-bang love letter to stunt performers and their contribution to Hollywood. To discuss it, I was first joined in the studio by film critic Kelechi Ehenulo. Here's Kelechi on whether The Fall Guy is a believable celebration of the stunt community and whether the film floated her boat.
It absolutely float my boat. It's a hell of a way to start the sentence. But yes, it's a brilliant celebration of the stunt community. You know, you're watching a film that it's a joyous occasion to see the stunt community basically get their spotlight. Yeah. You know, considering that, you know, the history of cinema, you know, I remember watching films with Harold Lloyd, Charlie Chaplin, Lauren Hardy, you know, these amazing people who basically set precedents of what stunts are and, you know, doing this all for real. And then you fast forward to the modern iteration where you're seeing films like Mad Max Fury Road or John Wick Chapter 4. And you're seeing these people putting their lives in front of the camera, risking their lives for our entertainment and joy. So to see all this culminates in The Fall Guy, David Leitch's amazing film, is a celebration. It's a joyous moment, and it's an appetite to basically get the recognition that they fully deserve. We're in 2024, the year of our Lord, and we still do not have an Oscar category for stunts.
Which is brought up in the film itself, isn't it? Which is kind of an interesting one. And you do, and I'm sure audiences will slightly scratch their heads and wonder why there isn't a little gold man for people being set on fire, being made to fall off bridges and to set sail in boats that are specifically unfloated. But I thought it was really interesting, Kelechi, your point about Harold Lloyd, Chaplin, Laurel and Hardy, these hugely physical comedians in the silent era. I mean, they were front and centre. They were the stars of their film. Obviously, they did all the narrative work, they did the subtle stuff, but they also did the pratfalls and the actual falls and all the rest of it. Do you see, it seems like you do, but a through line from that, the expertise of those performers, the physical, especially expertise of those performers, and the people that you never often see the face of in contemporary cinema, the stuntmen?
We wouldn't have what we have without those legends in place. And, you know, I think about even something like Jackie Chan, who watched those artists and incorporated it into his films like Police Story and Project A. You know, Project A has a very famous scene where he's hanging from a clock tower, you know, and dropping down. So seen that somewhere before, yeah. It's just I know where that joke's come from. So, you know, everything in Hollywood and in fact in cinema history is always borrowed from the past. So to see it being homaged in this way, and the brilliant thing about it is that we're seeing the elevation of it. We're bringing in new technology, new contraptions and things to make them much more exciting and exhilarating. The risks are higher, But at the same time, what the Fall Guy does really brilliantly is celebrate the craft. Like, you're seeing that behind the scene process. You're seeing people on the microphones, like checking in, making sure like the pyrotechnics are working well, which there's a brilliant funny moment where the pyrotechnic people are upset with the first AD and just setting off the bombs as they go along. But you're seeing those little bits of insights of what it's like in terms of creating the process. The fact that, as you was mentioning, that we don't see their faces just kind of just shows like how these people who have been unsung, they've not been celebrated in the way that they should have. And at least if there's one thing that has, I think, been hopefully the step in the right direction, is that we have Chris O'Hara, who's been officially credited as a stunt designer, and that is official record on the credits. So hopefully from this, as inspiring the next generation and also giving the stunt community the recognition that they deserve, that eventually leads on to some accreditation like the Oscars.
It's no spoiler to say that it's worth sitting in your cinema seat and right until the end of the credits, because the stunt performers in this film about stunt performers are nicely credited, where you see all the action scenes, you see the thrills, the spills, the bellyaches, all the rest of it as well. So that's a nice touch. What I wanted to ask you, before we go back to the stunt realm, is we also, of course, have on our hands a predictable, and ironically predictable, you might say, love story between the director Emily Blunt and the stuntman Ryan Gosling. What about the love story, Kelechi? Did that need to, I'm not going to say float your boat again. Was that believable? And if it wasn't, was it designed to be unbelievable, I wonder?
Well, to come back, it did float my boat, because Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt make this film. They are actors at the top of their game, in so to speak. Both of them coming off the back of Barbenheimer, which is obviously one of the biggest celebrational cinematic events of last year. And they've just joined forces and basically reconnected and created this magical experience on the big screen. I guess it's a film for everybody. It's not just a rom-com. It's action, it's comedy, it's everything just seamlessly into this genre mishmash.
There is a kitchen sink.
There is a kitchen sink element to it, but it's a kind of a joyous experience of that. And having Gosling and Blunt, who just make it just natural and just make everything look easy. Like, Blunt herself is no stranger to stunt work herself. If you think about Edge of Tomorrow, she has this real great attitude for knowing when to hold a comedic beat. Like, she plays around with the dialogue and just makes every line delivery so funny. And then you got Ryan Gosling, who, again, like, if you've seen...
a point at which he was embarking on a serious career.
Yeah.
And then I think he's kind of good. He's got a yo-yo thing with serious and straight and not straight.
He's Mr. Versatility. Like, that's how I look at him, And the thing is that I know a lot of people talk about his dramatic performances, but they're fantastic to me. Like, you think about Blade Runner 2049, A Place Beyond the Pines. These are really good performances. So there's not a kind of like a disdain on his...
And it's difficult to do funny, right?
Yeah, it's difficult to do funny. And that's a whole different skill set. And that's a major props and shout out to a film that very much reminded me of The Fall Guy, which is The Nice Guys, which stars opposite Russell Crowe. And in that film, which, thinking about how I mentioned about Howard Lloyd and Charlie Chaplin, so a lot of those comedic beats are very much what Ryan Gosling does throughout that film. And to see the evolution and the growth from The Nice Guys to Barbie and now The Fall Guy, all of that is just culminated into these amazing performances. And you see the best of everything from both of them. So they're the ones who hold this movie together.
Kelechi, this is also a film about filmmaking.
Yes.
And, it's a film about a bad film being made. Is it a good film about a bad film being made? Because it's kind of tough. When you start to lay your Hollywood cards on the table and you start to do a kind of inside job, you can come unstuck. For me, this mostly held it together and it was super entertaining and you could see exactly where it was going, and that's fine. But did it kind of hold could you suspend your disbelief throughout that it was in the fact that it was a film about films?
I guess the best way to answer that question is, if you love films like Bowfinger and Tropic Thunder, you will probably love The Fall Guy because of that, meta in-joke. And it is made for kind of like people who, like, if you studied the industry, if you're a film critic like myself, if you love movies, if you happen to work in the industry, you you will notice every single meta joke, laugh, even something like, I was at the screening the other day on Monday, and to watch that with a crowd. And even though most people probably didn't get it, but I was laughing at the fact that Colt was referencing about meal penalties, which I'm like, that is such a real,
this is the real,
yeah,
that you get
basically it's the real thing. It's the real deal. So it's everything that this film does is very much like, it's poking fun, but in a great way, but just showing you the real kind of the realities of what happens on a film set. And it does that in a celebrational way. So it's not necessarily like, Metal Storm, which is the film within the film. Think Mad Max Fury Road meets Cowboys and Aliens, that kind of vibe. And it is played for laugh. And, you have to suspend your disbelief, because it's like, well, I'm a sci-fi fan anyway, so I love anything that comes in that way. So the fact that it becomes a kind of a self-referential film, which Jodie bases it on her heartbreak of the fact that she got left in the cold and the dust by Colt, who in the beginning of the movie suffers an onset accident and then doesn't contact Jodie for about 18 months. And basically in that 18 months, she's basically written this story. Most creatives do that. We lean into our past and our experiences to write something that we know about to make it happen. So the fact that it becomes what it is, and then it is this movie within the movie and self-referential in it, is great. So it holds its attention very, very well, and it plays its part in the whole big thing of the genre mishmash that we see in The Fall Guy.
It is definitely a mishmash, isn't it? I'm glad you teased out that tortuous metaphor for us rather than me having to try to do it.
I try my best.
That's why we have you here.
I try my best.
Bring the experts in. Kelechi, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much.
For tiptoeing through the minefield that is The Fall Guy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Film critic Kelechi Ehenulo there, and you can read her full review on Empire's website. Now, what's it like throwing yourself off buildings and performing cannon rolls in a car for a living? Well, Nicholas Danes knows exactly what it's like, having performed stunts in films like Wonder Woman, The Batman, and Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Nicholas started off as a gymnast, and after representing Great Britain, he moved to Hollywood to follow his dream to appear on the big screen. Since then, he's worked his way up and performed as a stuntman for some of the world's biggest stars. Here he is to talk about how his background as a gymnast provided the perfect springboard for a career as a stunt performer.
The core elements of gymnastics are spatial awareness, knowing where you are in time and space, so you always know where you are to keep yourself safe and others around you safe. And those really put you in good stead for jumping off buildings, being set on fire and hit by cars, because, when you are hit by a car, a lot of it is very much a gymnastic element. You're doing a side somersault onto the bonnet and then rolling up the windshield and knowing where you are in time and space as you are then catapulted off the back of the car. So gymnastics is an excellent skill for making a good stuntman or a stunt performer.
I'd love to know what it's like transferring then onto film sets. You've worked with Tom Cruise, Angelina Jolie, you've worked with Tom Hardy, Cillian Murphy, Brad Pitt, all sorts of huge, the biggest names in Hollywood. It's an interesting thing. And this film, The Fall Guy, is all about the relationship between a stunt performer and the actor. It's not a happy one in this case, but I'm sure it was with you guys. What is the relationship? How close do you get? How much time do you have to spend with an actor in order to be able to believably be their sort of action double, I wonder?
Initially, it all starts from the coordinator bringing you on board with the right vital statistics. So you've got to have the right height, the right skill set, hair color, all those things, hair length, that those all come into play to actually be selected in the first place. And then once you are selected by the stunt coordinator, you then, depending on what you're doing in your role as stunt double, you might have to work very closely with the actor, say on a run for a Tom Cruise movie or an Angelina Jolie movie. You'll be on the whole run and you'll be involved in every aspect of all the stunts, as involved with training them, making sure that they have everything they need and all the skills and rehearsals necessary for them to be able to perform the stunt in whichever capacity they're going to do it for the movie. So you can be working very closely with them, or, you can just be called in for the day for a stunt double and literally you're just in for a few hours and you won't even see the star. So it can be very different ends of the spectrum in that regard. But, the role of the stunt performer is really only just beginning to emerge from the shadows and get the recognition it deserves. And this Fall Guy is a wonderful vehicle for that.
Yeah, it is indeed. And actually, the end of the film, the Fall Guys and girls, as it were, get their sort of I wouldn't say they're just desserts, but they come out of the shadows, as it were, in a big way at the end of the movie. And it really is a sort of loving pain to the stunt performer. Just to go back to your on-set work, Nicholas, is the requirement for a stunt performer sort of written into parts of a script? I mean, someone like Tom Cruise is quite well known for doing some of his own stunts, if not a lot of his own stunts, for example, and he's an action performer. Are they kind of built in, or is it just kind of like, well, I don't really fancy being dangled off this crane this morning. Let's get Nicholas into shot.
Within the script, there will be the action that's written, and then the stunt coordinator will break that action down and ascertain as to what the actor will be able to do, and then perhaps bring in someone like myself as stunt double who will need to perhaps do the wide shots of the whole stunt and the more dangerous elements to it. So it will be written into the script, but it's broken down by the stunt coordinator, and he'll bring on whoever he needs and what talent he needs.
And I wondered how stunts work as you get older, looking at the British Stunt Register, which I'd love to talk to you about a little bit more specifically in a second, Nicholas. Is that standing in? I mean, he is one of the world's greatest actors, but I'd be surprised if Ian McKellen would put his hand up to be set on flames and jumping out of a burning building. So is this where the older stunt performer lies for these more mature roles? I see also on your CV that you've stood in for the Queen. No small part there. How do the more specific areas of stunt performing work, I wonder?
Yeah, so if you've got an elderly or aging actor, you really will want to save them for the acting parts, and you'll just get a stunt double in. You might try to go towards get someone who's more towards their age, and we've got a spectrum of stunt performers from very young to very old, and hair and makeup also play their part in that by creating older looking faces and wigs, etc. But, if you see the face, the game's up anyway. So it really doesn't have to be an age appropriate stunt double, as it were. If your actor is not very physical and or doesn't want to do it, you'll get a stunt double in from the very beginning. That's really how it works.
So the British Stunt Register, it's an amazing thing. We're proud to say, as purveyors of print in this building, Midori House, that it is a sort of stocky paperback volume, updated, I think, yearly. Nicholas, tell us a little bit about the job of the British Stunt Register, your involvement in it. It's half a century old, isn't it? So it is an august publication in its own right. But this is wonderful to see this thing. I guess, yeah, it's a yellow pages for stunt performers.
Yes, we've just celebrated our 50th year and our 50th anniversary, which is amazing. And the British Stunt Register is the leading organization in the world for stunt performers. And we have a very long and rich history of the stunt profession in this country, dating back as far back as 1966, when the first agreement between Paddy Ryan and Bill Sawyer was created to form the Stuntman's Guild, which really paved the way and created the stunt industry that we know today. And then as far as the British Stunt Register goes, its origins date back officially to 1973. And we have just, as I say, celebrated our 50th anniversary. And it really is like a yellow pages for stunt performers. The path to get into the British Stunt Register book is quite rigorous. You have to pass rigorous tests in 6 disciplines, and then those disciplines are tested by experts in those areas and ticked off as to whether you make the criteria, and then that goes before a committee. Once you've done all the disciplines and a committee decide, yes, you have fulfilled the criteria and you can actually join the Stunt Register. So there is a very rigorous process just to even get in the book and start your career as a stunt performer. But what's fantastic about the British Stunt Register, or BSR as we call ourselves, is the fact that we have a career graded scheme whereby you start as a probationary member of the Stunt Register, and we have training and health and safety and courses all the way through to then eventually bring you up to stunt coordinator. We mustn't forget that even the simplest stunt can go wrong, and some people don't actually make it home from the job. So, it is not to be underestimated, and it is an incredibly dangerous profession.
No, you're absolutely right to call attention to that. I mean, and that's in a funny way and in a less funny way as part of this movie, The Fall Guy. And in that film, we see a producer who's very hungry just to get the film cut and dried, and a director who actually wants to stick up for her stuntman. There is this issue of, oh, sod it, we'll just do it in CGI. We'll put someone else's face on him and we'll CGI it. I wonder to what extent that is a threat to the skill and sort of sanctity of your industry, Nicholas, actually, the often dreaded blue screen for actors and for stunt performers alike, I guess.
The future is a little uncertain, especially with the evolving AI. At the moment, of course, we still need stunt performers, and you can get the shot with face replacement, but usually we still need the stuntman to do the action, and then we'll just replace the face of the star after that. Blue screen, yes, there's lots of blue screen involved, and they have probably been creating an image and action library for AI over the years. So it is a precarious business as to what the future does hold for the stunt profession. But I think people want to see real stunts. I think they want that real element to it, and that's what makes them unique, and that's what keeps audiences on the edge of their seat and keeps them coming back.
Yeah, I think we can always tell when it's real or fake, and when someone's really putting the hard graft in as a stunt performer, Nicholas. And just finally, one note, just to take it back to set. What is the direction that's been hollered in your earpiece or with a loud hailer across the set to you more times than any other, I wonder? I'd love to know what the general instruction is that you're receiving.
Well, usually it's harder, faster, but a good coordinator will, rein the director or producers back in and say, whatever is the safest. There's so much going on set. I think one of the key elements to being a good stunt performer is that discipline and that mind over matter, and being able to drown out the noise and focus on what you've got to do, because there is nothing natural about throwing yourself off a building or being set on fire, but you are just able to focus on your core disciplines, know what you do, know what your body does, and trust in that. And you just then are able to provide that mind over matter, which, the average person can't do, and throw yourself off that building. That's the difference between stunt performers and those that can't make the grade.
Stunt performer Nicholas Danes there. And to watch Nicholas break down exactly how stunts work, including some of those from The Fall Guy, you can check out his YouTube channel. Finally, on today's show, we wanted to find out to what extent law firms are involved in film production and how a movie with lots of stunts, as well as the evolving nature of the industry, might change this. I was joined in the studio by Anthony Swiatek, who's a partner at London's Lee & Thompson, a law firm that specialises in the creative industries. I asked Anthony what common things could go wrong on a film set that he might have to get involved in.
Because I deal with contracts, I might often be involved at the initial stages of resolving some kind of dispute or some kind of problem that occurs on set. There's obviously a stage at which that becomes, truly contentious, and a litigation lawyer, one of our dispute resolution team, would be more involved, and that becomes an adversarial thing rather than, seeking to just find a resolution to a problem. I mean, the obvious things are accidents and the extent to which someone is to blame. Naturally, on somewhere like a film set, it isn't always safe. There are different types of films. Some films are inherently less safe than others because of the format. An action movie, a superhero movie, those kind of things. There will be stunts, there will be moving cars, there will be people falling over, there might be, live ammunition, the kind of questions which are the obvious ones that people have talked about lately. So those things do happen. And a lot of the time they're dealt with, and a lot of the time they occurred because they were genuine accidents.
Do you ever get involved in what constitutes a stunt and what doesn't? Like driving a car through a burning hoop off a bridge into shark-infested waters, I'd say is a stunt. I mean, who knows how we both got here to the studio.
I've never defined it in a contract, put it
right,
that way.
okay,
I don't think. I think what we're talking about generally is, Because stunts, if you talk to us, and I imagine you've talked to a stunt performer for this too, but the range of what they do is actually really wide. And it isn't just jumping out of a window or driving a car really fast or running through a fire, but, you know, a lot of the stuff that you would see very regularly in films, you know, being extras in armies or enforcers, any kind of fight scenes, guns, all of that stuff falls within the purview of a stunt performer. Not all of that would necessarily be considered a stunt by the layman, I suppose. So there's a pretty broad definition of what that is. I think in general terms, if something has a degree of risk attached to it that is beyond walking in and out of a building, the sort of things you do in your daily life, then I think you'd probably start to think of that as being a stunt performance to a lesser or a greater degree.
I wonder, in your experience, your actual experience on the job, or just your knowledge of this area of law, Anthony, whether a large change has happened at some point during the making of motion pictures that's made things better, safer, more contractually watertight, more, I use this word terribly badly and wrongly, but more legal. Are things better than they were?
There probably are more contracts now. The contracts are probably more heavily drafted. But as I said before, I mean, from a stunt performer's point of view, they're probably more lopsided than they ever were. Mainly because the world is, you know, conscious, and this is not just a film or creative industries thing, but the world's more conscious of litigation, frankly, and trying to do what you can to combat that. I think on the flip side, responsible production companies, financiers have also taken much more of a nuanced and you know, responsible view in relation to risk assessments, health and safety policies, and those kind of things. So I would imagine that most people would say that life on a set is probably inherently a bit safer than it was, and that people maybe take safety and risk assessment and those kind of things more seriously. But at the same time, even though there's lots of green screen and there's lots of VFX and now there's AI and all of those kind of things, there's still a ton of stunts and special effects that get done on movies. And there's even an argument actually in the wake of AI that there's a sort of move back towards traditional performance of live action. And so, you know, I think increasingly maybe in the next few years you might actually see more of that kind of stuff because people want it to be, you know, quote unquote real. And that in itself obviously leads to increased degree of risk, and it's about insurance coverage. It's about making sure that those things are done in a very sort of safe and sterile, dare I say, a boring environment. As much as exciting as it looks on screen, there's a lot of work that goes into making sure things don't go wrong. And if AI ushers in a new Back to the Future thing of more traditional real filmmaking and stunt performance, as it were, is that good for business, I wonder? My kind of bread and butter work is very much in the independent film space, so stuff from kind of $5 to $25 million, and independent movies, you know, there may be action, there may be some stuff, stunts and things involved in that, but I guess I would call it, you know, probably truer independent filmmaking. And I think interesting thing is with the growth of AI, there's been lots of talk about the independent film sector and how it's going to survive in this country in particular. We've got nothing against those big studio blockbusters, but there are a lot of them, and they're a little bit repetitive at times. So for me, I'd rather be watching indie movies. I'd rather be working on them. So yeah, I mean, I don't think the AI is the end of everything. I think the other thing is that people don't really understand. AI has been around for quite a while and used in all sorts of avenues, and particularly in films, particularly in post-production, VFX and those kind of things. It's sort of built into the process in some ways already. I think the real fear is, you know, somebody creating characters and maybe actors and writers being made redundant. I mean, I think there's some argument that can happen, but people still go to watch movies because of the people who are in them.
And that is it for this week. My thanks to Anthony Swiatek there, and to Kelechi Ehenulo, and to Nicholas Danes. The Fall Guy is out in cinemas now and is a laugh and a half. Monocle on Culture is produced by Sophie Monaghan-Coombs and Steph Chungu, and Steph also edits the show. We'll be back at the same time next week, but until then, from me, Robert Bounds, thank you for tuning in.